The $11 billion lie that invented your diseases. By the time the voice said, "Ask your doctor," the diagnosis already had a name, a color palette, and a jingle. An $11 billion engine was whispering that your tiredness might be a syndrome, your fidgeting a disorder, your Tuesday a condition. Are you allergic to Tuesdays now? Meanwhile, your wallet, your health, and your trust were on the line because labels trigger pills and pills have consequences. Today we'll show who built that message, how it spread, and how to spot it in real time. To understand how this lie became truth, we have to go back, before the commercials felt normal. The permission slip, how pharma won your TV. The United States didn't always sound like a waiting room. In the early 1990s, drug makers mostly aimed their marketing at doctors. Direct-to-consumer TV ads for prescription drugs were rare, borderline impossible. The rules required listing essentially every risk and contraindication, fine in print, absurd for a 30-second spot. So companies flirted with disease awareness ads that never named a brand, while lobbyists and lawyers quietly pushed regulators for clarity. Here's the moment the door opened. In 1997, the Food and Drug Administration released draft guidance that reinterpreted how companies could meet the adequate provision requirement. Finalized in 1999, meaning companies had to make full risk information available somewhere consumers could access it. Instead of reading the entire risk label aloud, a broadcast ad could state the drug's major risks, then direct viewers to a toll-free number, a print ad, a website, or a healthcare professional for the full prescribing information. In plain English, you could legally put a prescription drug on television without listing everything, as long as you pointed people somewhere that did. The final guidance in 1999 cemented the model. Industry argued this wasn't a loosening, just a clarification, making broadcast ads feasible while keeping fair balance between benefits and risks. Practically, it changed the air. Before the guidance, TV was a minefield. After it was open road. Within a few years, you couldn't watch the evening news without a sunset walk, a butterfly logo, and a fast talker cramming "may cause" into 5 seconds. Only 2 countries allow this kind of advertising. The US and New Zealand. DTCA remains banned in most of Europe, Canada, and Japan. That's not an accident. It's a policy choice backed by decades of lobbying and a friendly reading of the rules. And once the guidance hit, something else shifted: the economics of media. Broadcasters suddenly had a deep-pocketed category willing to pay premium rates week after week. Newsrooms felt it in their budgets. Health segments tilted toward drug breakthroughs, pipeline updates, and awareness campaigns. Not because reporters were corrupt, but because ad dollars set the temperature of the room, and pharma has ranked among the top 5 TV ad categories in multiple years. Meanwhile, pharma built out the playbook. Disease awareness campaigns warmed the audience, commercials that never said a brand, only a feeling. Are you tired, unfocused, bloated, restless? And a hint that millions like you might be missing something. Then the branded ads arrived with a name, a copay card, and a promise of control, tight scripts engineered to spike recall and prompt a specific ask in a 12-minute visit. The phrase, "ask your doctor," once a courtesy, became a pressure tactic inside a 12-minute appointment. Patients arrived pre-framed. Doctors faced a choice: spend 5 minutes unspooling an ad or write the script and move to the next patient. What nobody knew at the time was how quickly volume would explode. In 1997, medical marketing spend was under $20 billion across the entire landscape, with roughly $1.3 billion on prescription drugs advertised directly to consumers. Less than 20 years later, drug ads alone were hovering around $6 billion annually, with hundreds of thousands of TV spots and millions of digital placements each year. The mix shifted, too, toward high-cost drugs and specialty treatments where each new patient could yield tens of thousands of dollars over time. That math mattered. If a TV campaign cost hundreds of millions but nudged enough people to start therapy and stay, it paid for itself. While that was happening on your screen, another campaign operated in the background. Trade groups visited Capitol Hill to keep the status quo intact. Legal teams framed the ads as education, not pure promotion. Medical marketers tested colors, gestures, and storylines designed to lower defenses. A grandfather throwing a baseball said normalcy. A kitchen table said home. Soft focus said safety. And the major risk statement? Compressed, friendly, paired with images of smiling neighbors. Here's where media economics locked in. When a category becomes a cornerstone of ad revenue, platforms adapt to serve it. Morning shows booked more pharma-friendly segments. Lifestyle magazines added health awareness features with convenient ad adjacency. Later, social platforms would refine that into micro-targeting, but the seed was TV. You fund the programming creates adjacency. Adjacency makes the message familiar. Familiarity makes the prescription likelier. The FDA never disappeared from this story. Enforcement letters still went out for misleading claims, missing risks, or overstated benefits. Programs like Bad Ad taught clinicians to spot violations. Periodically, political pressure swung back toward tighter oversight, calls to rethink adequate provision, to force fuller risk disclosures, to curb feel-good messaging that glossed over harms. Yet the baseline, legal broadcast ads with condensed risk and a pointer to details elsewhere, hell. Meanwhile, New Zealand watched the same commercials on the other side of the world and wrestled with similar debates. Everywhere else kept the ban. That contrast says something. Most countries decided that prescription drugs were too complex to sell like cereal. The US decided that with guardrails, it was fine. Here's how it plays out. An ad buyer at a local station remembers the day Pharma filled a budget hole that would have meant layoffs. The check cleared. The station survived. 10 years later, their primetime block was a rotation of pills. That's not villainy. That's how incentives move culture. The permission slip wasn't just a memo. It was a pivot in how we learned about illness through stories written by people who benefit when more of us feel sick. But the ads didn't just sell pills. They sold problems to fix, conditions to name, and thresholds to cross. And once you can market a condition, you can grow a market. Now the real turn, ads didn't only describe diseases, they helped invent patients. Curiosity check. How many new patients came from moving a line versus treating a problem? Watch the thresholds. Inventing the patient. The playbook of disease mongering. Here's the quiet magic trick. If you can expand what counts as sick, you don't just sell more drugs, you create more customers. The playbook starts by stretching definitions. Normal variation becomes pathology. Risk factors become conditions. You don't have high cholesterol, you have hyperlipidemia risk. You're not tired, you might have energy dysregulation. It sounds technical, and that's the point. Technical makes it feel real. Next move, name it. A label is a story in one word. Preconditions are especially powerful. Prediabetes, prehypertension, osteopenia. Pre feels like a warning light on the dashboard. You're not broken yet, but you're on the road to breaking. That framing nudges action because nobody wants to wait and see if a warning turns red. Awareness months and ribbons do the cultural work, soften the ground, add community, and make asking for treatment feel responsible. Then come the checklists. Vague, broad, familiar. Do you ever feel tired, distracted, restless, or stressed? Check, 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 check. The more universal the list, the more people see themselves inside it. Online quizzes turn this into a funnel. You answer 5 questions, the result says you may be at risk. There's a link to talk to a professional, a sponsored resource, a branded site. Every path leads to the same door. Meanwhile, the experts who define the boundaries, the ones writing guidelines and consensus statements, are not immune to influence. Key opinion leaders, or KOLs, get recruited to speak at conferences, sit on panels, advise committees. They're paid honoraria, flown to meetings, consulted for insight. None of that is illegal, and much of it funds genuine research. But influence piles up like dust. Ghostwritten articles make the evidence sound tidy. Trials are designed with endpoints that flatter the drug. Relative risk reductions highlighted, absolute benefits buried. When a committee lowers a threshold or adds a pre-category, millions of people move from healthy to patient instantly. Ask Your Doctor is the final lever. Inside a 12-minute visit, a printed quiz and a patient story carry weight. A doctor can push back, but it takes time to explain base rates, uncertainty, and options. Writing a prescription is faster. Multiply that by a waiting room and a full schedule, and the ad wins by default. It's not malice, it's throughput, and it converts curiosity into scripts. Now watch a condition get born. It starts as a cluster of symptoms, common, nagging, hard to measure. Insomnia, irritability, trouble concentrating, a sense of fog. Plenty of causes could be at play: stress, sleep debt, diet, grief, workload. The playbook isolates the cluster, gives it a neutral scientific label that doesn't overpromise but sounds distinct. Think Syndrome X, disorder spectrum, or a phrase that suggests imbalance. Early conference posters describe an unmet need. Small studies hint at prevalence. Prevalence is key. If you can argue it's widespread, you've got attention. Awareness campaigns follow. A celebrity mentions they struggled in silence. A podcast host takes a sponsored quiz on air and shares their score. Curiosity loop. The quiz never yields your fine, only you may be at risk. A patient group forms on social media, curated by an agency that moderates posts and shares educational content. The stories are real, people do hurt, do struggle, but the narrative direction is guided. The call to action is steady, talk to your doctor. When the drug launches, the ads are gentle. Pastel colors, a steady voice, couples drinking coffee. The brand story reassures you're not broken, you're just out of balance, and balance can be restored. The major risks are read calmly over the image of someone gardening. The website shows before and after graphs with smoothed lines. Common side effects are minimized with soft language, may include, often mild, usually temporary. You're invited to start today and to keep going. Post-launch, the expansion begins. Cutoffs are broadened. What counted as borderline last year now counts as diagnosable. Subtypes are introduced for people who don't respond right away. Resistant, atypical, mixed presentation. Each subtype suggests a tweak, a higher dose, an add-on, a second prescription to manage the side effects of the first. Follow-up studies compare the drug to placebo instead of lifestyle changes or older generics, so the benefit looks brighter. Relative risk figures headline the press release, 40% more likely to improve. Absolute numbers, which often look modest, for example, 25% versus 20%, live in the fine print. Here's the stakes plain. When definitions expand, the population under treatment grows. That means more people exposed to side effects with smaller chances of benefit. It means money redirected from things that work for many, sleep, food, movement, counseling, toward things that work for some at a high price. It means years of identity shaped by a label that began in a meeting room. What nobody sees from the outside is how coordinated it feels from the inside. The medical education module funded by the manufacturer emphasizes screening. The guideline panel cites new prevalence data. The patient group posts about finally having a name. The primary care doc gets a sample box and a glossy summary. The pharmacist prints a copay card. The ad on TV closes the loop. Meanwhile, a quiet counter-narrative exists. Independent reviews ask for absolute benefits, numbers needed to treat, time horizons. Some committees hold firm on thresholds. Some journals reject ghostwritten manuscripts. Some doctors build longer visits around shared decision-making. But they're rowing against a current powered by stories, incentives, and repetition. The playbook isn't a conspiracy, it's a system. Every part has a business reason. Expand definitions, create labels, prime with checklists, recruit experts, compress risks, accelerate the script. The result is predictable. More of us become patients, not because we got sicker, but because the line moved. The birth of a condition, a case study timeline. 3 years before the first ad, a team inside a mid-sized pharma company circles a slide. Untapped need. It isn't a disease yet. It's a symptom cluster. Daytime fog, mid-afternoon slump, irritability, trouble staying on task. Common, hard to measure, likely to resonate. The addressable market projection lights up the room. If even a fraction seeks treatment, the revenue line justifies the spend. To understand how it becomes real, we have to watch the slow build. First, see the idea where credibility grows, conferences. Early posters use cautious language, emerging burden, functional impairment, quality of life decrement. The prevalence estimate is wide, somewhere between 10% and 35%, but wide implies large. A small trial suggests that a molecule the company already owns might improve subjective scores. The endpoints are soft, but they move. Meanwhile, an unbranded website appears. It's educational, supposedly. It asks, do you fade after lunch? With a slider scale and a downloadable checklist. There's a physician finder, talk to a specialist near you, and a webinar hosted by a respected academic who discloses consulting fees on slide 27. On social media, a new hashtag gathers stories. People share how they finally felt seen. The agency moderates the group. Trolls are blocked. Skepticism is deflected toward, don't minimize people's suffering. 6 months later, a glossy burden of illness paper lands in a journal. The affiliations page shows multiple authors with industry ties. The study is observational, based on a convenient sample recruited online, but the numbers are startling. Missed workdays, relationship strain, sleep disruption. A heat map of symptoms makes the cluster look like a fingerprint. Unique, needing a name. At a consensus meeting, the label is tested. Something neutral and clinical with a hint of imbalance. The acronym rolls off the tongue. This is the moment the condition is born. Press releases frame it as recognition, not invention. Millions may be living with undiagnosed name. Morning shows run segments with a friendly expert. Quizzes flash on screen for viewers to check your risk. A celebrity says they struggled for years until they found help. Comments flood in. The market warms. Now the drug arrives. The brand film shows a life slightly out of phase, a parent forgetting a school form, a worker rereading an email, a student drifting in lecture. Then a click, a morning light, a return to rhythm. The voiceover is calm. If you feel out of sync, brand may help. The major risks glide by on photographs of potlucks and backyard games. The website highlights relative improvements. Patients were 40% more likely to feel focused, with footnotes that translate to small absolute differences. There's a copay card and a starter kit. In clinics, reps drop off samples and a one-page summary, key stats, dosing, common side effects. The clinical trial compared the drug to placebo, not to caffeine, naps, exercise, therapy, or lighter schedules. A sidebar mentions adjunctive strategies without saying which work. Primary care sees the swell first. Patients arrive with checklists marked. I think I have name. A doctor knows this could be stress, anemia, sleep apnea, depression, or just life. But the waiting room is full. The prescription pad moves. Post-launch, the growth levers engage. Thresholds nudge lower, what was subclinical becomes mild. New subtypes are defined: inattentive dominant, fatigue predominant, mixed. Each suggests a dosing tweak or an add-on. A second paper argues that untreated name raises long-term risks, accidents, burnout, even cardiovascular markers. The causal chain is fuzzy, but the headline lands: ignoring name has costs. Payers update formularies after rebate talk. Step therapy is introduced, but the steps are short. In the patient group, stories shift from "I'm not alone" to "I'm on my regimen." Influencers post "day in my life with name" videos sponsored lightly, thanks to brand for supporting this discussion. Meanwhile, CME modules emphasize recognition and screening. The pre-test asks how often you should screen. The answer is often. Behind the scenes, safety signals appear. Some patients report jitteriness, blood pressure spikes, sleep disruption. The label already lists these, but in the wild they cluster. A post-marketing study starts, designed carefully with outcomes that favor continuation. Regulatory letters nudge the company to clarify a claim. The company complies. The ads continue. Numbers jump. Doctors notice that the condition shows up more in the EHR, not because it's new, but because the line moved. Schools send home notes suggesting evaluation. Employers add focus and energy programs. Insurers cover the drug with a tiered copay. Pharmacies stock end caps with educational brochures. The impact is mixed, which is the point. Some people feel better and function better. They're grateful. Others start a cascade, side effects, and add on to manage them, a label that lingers long after the episode would have passed. Budgets tilt toward prescriptions. Time tilts away from root causes. The market doesn't measure the counterfactuals, the walks taken, the schedules adjusted, the extra hour of sleep, but it counts refill. This is how a condition grows up. Not overnight, not via a villain's monologue, but through a dozen aligned nudges. A name, a paper, a panel, a checklist, a story, an ad, a sample, a threshold. And once it's established, the map is set for the next condition waiting in the wings. Redefining normal. When guidelines move the goalposts, while that new condition was gathering steam, quieter committees were redrawing the field. This is where the story slips from advertising to arithmetic. When a panel shifts a cutoff by a few points, millions of people cross an invisible line and pharmacy counters get busier. Take blood pressure. For years, normal meant under 140/90. Then guideline writers moved the target down to 130/80 for many adults per 2017 ACC AHA guidance. Overnight, tens of millions more Americans were labeled hypertensive. The stakes sound noble: prevent strokes and heart attacks earlier, but the math is tricky. At lower risk levels, the absolute benefit of a pill shrinks while the chance of side effects stays. Dizziness, kidney strain, fatigue. None of that makes headlines, but it shows up in real lives. Cholesterol followed a similar path. Once, targets focused on very high LDL or people with known heart disease. Over time, risk calculators widened eligibility, e.g., pooled cohort equations launched in 2013. Suddenly, a middle-aged person with a few risk factors landed in a treatment box. Statins can be life-saving for high-risk groups, but for many at low risk, the absolute benefit is small over years. The press release highlights relative risk reductions, a 25% drop, but the absolute numbers might move from 4 events in 100 to 3. The way you frame that changes how it feels. Now add the pre-zones. Prediabetes took what used to be a warning, your blood sugar's creeping up, and gave it a label that sounds like a diagnosis. Osteopenia did it for bone density, not osteoporosis, but pre-weakness. These labels aren't fake, they're markers. But once named, they start to behave like diseases. Screening expands. Clinics print recall lists. Pharmacies add reminder call. And because the label feels urgent, people accept long-term medicines for small absolute gains while lifestyle changes. The ones with broader payoffs get the leftover time. Behind these shifts are committees, often made up of smart, well-meaning clinicians. Many disclose financial ties to manufacturers of the very drugs their thresholds would activate. That doesn't make decisions corrupt, but it raises a question about gravity. When your world is built around pharmacologic solutions, the needle tends to point there. Meanwhile, the guideline process rewards clean consensus statements, not messy caveats about uncertainty, baseline risk, or alternative path. Here's where language does work. High risk sounds like a cliff edge, even if the math says your risk moves from low to slightly less low. May help slides by like a whisper, yet it carries years of pills. Restore balance implies your body is off, even when the numbers come from statistical cutoffs chosen by committee, not a hard line in nature. Screening creep seals it. Add tests to annual checkups, lower thresholds, and positives multiply. A borderline result triggers a confirmatory test. A confirmatory test triggers a follow-up visit. The visit ends with a prescription to be safe. Anxiety rises in the space between ordered tests and results, and once a chart has a label, it tends to stick. Few charts carry the counter-label. We decided to wait. Quick story, a teacher in her 40s gets a letter after a workplace screening, elevated cholesterol. She starts a statin. 6 months later, her legs ache. She stops running, gains weight, feels older. Her 10-year risk was already low. The relative reduction looked good. The absolute benefit was tiny. The headline number sold the plan. The footnote held the truth. None of this erases real prevention. Lowering very high blood pressure saves lives. Treating severe hyperlipidemia matters. The problem is drift. Guidelines designed for the sickest become default for everyone, and the debate plays out in percentages. Relative risk is a marketer's friend. Cut in half sounds dramatic, even when it means 2 in 100 becomes 1. What nobody tells you is how time changes the value. A drug that shaves a small absolute risk over 10 years might be less useful if your other risks are low, or if you prefer to invest that decade in sleep, diet, movement, and stress reduction that cut multiple risks at once. But reimbursement flows cleanly for pills, not for cooking classes, walking groups, or time to talk. Press releases become health news and nuance falls away. New guidelines, millions qualify, makes a good segment. Absolute benefit modest, shared decision advised doesn't, so the goalposts move, the map updates, and normal narrows. People who felt fine yesterday wake up at risk today, and pharmacies get busier. Now add your media feed, the engine that never sleeps, the attention machine. Ads, algorithms, and health anxiety. Now add your media feed, the engine that never sleeps. The sunset walks and butterfly logos didn't stay on TV. They became pre-rolls, mid-rolls, and swipe-up stories. The same soft focus promise met a new superpower, micro-targeting. If your search history includes "can't sleep," the system learns you're restless. If you pause on a clip about brain fog, the system learns you're worried. It doesn't judge, it just feeds. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Symptom content became a category. On YouTube, do you have thumbnails stack? On TikTok, creators describe their 5 signs with a jump cut and a caption. Harsh fluorescent doctors' offices are swapped for bedrooms and cars where confessions feel intimate. Algorithms reward what keeps you watching. Fear keeps you watching. So the loop tightens. Watch a video about headaches, get served 3 more about migraines, then one about a new treatment with a brand-friendly disclaimer. You don't see the code, you just feel seen. Sponsored health quizzes slip in as education. Find your type, check your risk, learn the signs, all phrased like a public service, all built as lead generation. The results rarely say you're fine. They say you may be at risk and point to a provider finder or a branded resource. Data you give in a moment of worry becomes a retargeting seed. Weeks later, the ad that found you follows you not by magic but by a budget and a pixel. Unknown to most viewers, influencer partnerships rewire trust. A patient advocate shares their journey, earnest, vulnerable, helpful. The video is sponsored, disclosed in tiny text or a quick verbal nod, but the story is human, which makes the message sticky. Pharma doesn't need to script every word. It just needs to guide the frame, emphasize recognition, normalize the label, present medication as the sensible next step. The best partnerships don't feel like ads. They feel like a friend's advice. Patient communities are captured gently. A Facebook group begins as peer support, then an agency offers moderation help. Content gets curated. High hope stories rise, skeptical threads stall. Webinars arrive with independent experts who happen to sit on speakers' bureaus. None of this is illegal. It's alignment. When the community's primary resource is sponsored, the boundaries of acceptable conversation shift. Questions about lifestyle alternatives get a polite nod. Posts about brand experiences trend. Here, where emotion powers the machine. Ads promise relief from shame. You're not lazy, you have a condition. They sell hope, you can be yourself again. They promise control, take back your day. These are real needs. But when every emotional hook funnels toward the same answer, the menu shrinks in your head. The algorithm remembers that you engaged with relief, so it serves more relief. The loop narrows until pills feel like the only lane with sign-in. What nobody knew at the time was how easy it would be to pre-qualify you. Wearables and apps, sleep, steps, mood, cycle, glucose are great tools, also great affinity signals. Struggle with sleep 3 nights in a row, expect bedtime ads. Log low energy for a week, expect focused content, then a sponsored telehealth link. The data trails you leave are breadcrumbs leading to an outcome that pays well for the advertiser and the platform. Your anxiety becomes inventory. Press releases morph into health news in your feed with a badge of authority. New study shows appears as an article card. Click through and you'll find relative risk reductions and a quote from a key opinion leader who also consults for the manufacturer. It looks like journalism because it's edited like journalism. It reads like marketing because it's funded like marketing. The nuance, the absolute numbers, the side effect burdens, sits behind a paywall or a full PDF most people won't open. Meanwhile, the platform's business model rewards repetition. If a message drives engagement, it gets more oxygen. A drug launch with a heavy budget runs across channels. Banner, pre-roll, creator read, podcast host mention. You hear it at the gym, see it at lunch, scroll past it at night. Familiarity becomes truth, and truth becomes, I should ask my doctor, because the phrase is a cultural reflex now. Real example, a dad doomscrolls at 1 a.m., lands on a clip about hidden adult attention issues, takes a 3-question quiz, gets a score he can't interpret, clicks a telehealth link, and books a next-day consult. 12 minutes later, he's got a diagnosis and a trial pack. He's not a fool. He's a human in a system designed to say yes quickly. The attention machine doesn't need to lie to work. It just needs to narrow your options until one path looks inevitable. And when money steers the message, the inevitable tends to be billable. Buying credibility. Doctors, journals, and independent voices. Behind the warm ad sits a colder campaign. Buy trust slowly, not envelopes under tables, calendars full of small yesies. Start with key opinion leaders. KOLs aren't cartoon villains, they're the clinicians other doctors respect. They publish, present, sit on committees. Put them on a speaker's bureau, pay honoraria, cover travel, invite advisory roles. Each event discloses ties, but the repetition matters. After a few years, the audience can't tell where enthusiasm ends and incentives begin. Meanwhile, ghostwriting polishes the evidence. A medical writing firm drafts a manuscript from internal data, an academic signs on, revises, approves. It's legal if contributions are acknowledged, but readers rarely see the scaffolding. Endpoints flatter, subgroups suggest. The paper becomes a citation in guidelines, a talking point in CME, a bullet on a rep's leave behind. What nobody sees are the shelved trials or safety signals that don't headline. Then come seeding trials, small, pragmatic studies that look like science but function like sampling. Hundreds of community clinicians enroll patients, gain research experience, and get comfortable prescribing the sponsor's drug. Results land in a company-funded journal supplement, edited by a writing firm, reviewed by friendly eyes. The supplement borrows the journal's logo and lends back credibility. CME, the continuing medical education clinicians need, becomes another lane. Independent CME exists, but industry-funded CME is everywhere. Sponsors don't script slides, yet topic choice and framing shape the lesson, emphasize underdiagnosis, highlight burdens, normalize long-term therapy, downplay discontinuation. A pre-test asks, how often should you screen? The post-test answers, more often. Patient advocacy groups carry the community's voice, and many rely on pharma grants to survive. That money funds helplines, conferences, and outreach and nudges messaging. Campaigns spotlight recognition and access, not to prescribing or non-drug alternatives. Reporters get a trained quote, "Medications are one important tool." True, but not the whole story. The group's logo appears in partnership, lending patient weight to brand promises. Press releases slide into newsrooms as ready-made stories. A university center touts a landmark study, co-authored with industry. Morning shows book the pie. Beats, millions affected, under-recognized burden promising therapy, talk to your doctor. It feels like journalism because the set looks like journalism. The corrections, absolute risk, conflicts, uncertainties rarely make air. Journal ads and conference booths do their part. A full-page spread anchors a drug beside peer-reviewed content. At conferences, branded pavilions, coffee lines through exhibits, and science theaters present sponsored talks that look like mini keynotes. A resident wanders through and leaves feeling the drug is everywhere, therefore established. Even influence metrics have sponsors. Citation trackers, guideline repositories, and point-of-care apps weave sponsored nudges into educational feeds. Alongside dosing tables sits a suggested algorithm. It's small, subtle, cumulative. Quick story, a cardiologist in practice 20 years chairs a satellite symposium. He insists on fair balance includes side effects. The sponsor thanks him, then invites him to consult on trial design. He believes earnestly he's improving care. 2 years later, he's his region's top prescriber. He didn't sell out. He adopted a narrative wrapped in respect. The media ecosystem amplifies it. Pipeline news with sponsor banners, breakthrough headlines from careful releases, podcasts with charismatic clinicians whose disclosures fly by. Conviction lands, caveats don't. What keeps this humming is the appearance of independence. Buffers sanitize money, grants instead of fees, bureaus instead of payroll, unrestricted gifts instead of contracts, journal supplements instead of brochures. The message still moves. There's a countercurrent. Tough journals demand data sharing. Some CME providers reject industry funding. Advocacy groups disclose donors and set firewalls. Reporters push for absolute numbers, not relative hype. These efforts matter, but they swim upstream against budgets, deadlines, and familiarity. On the ground, by the time an ad reaches you, the culture is warmed. Your doctor's inbox has pearls from sponsored CME. The guideline cites trials with friendly endpoints. The handout came via grant. The news segment echoed a press release. It looks independent. It often isn't, not fully. And even when it is, it's surrounded by voices bought gently to harmonize. The side effects you don't see in the ad. You've seen the smiling backyard barbecue while the voice lists may include nausea, headache, and moves on. What you don't see are the quiet harms that don't fit in a 15-second disclaimer. Start with overdiagnosis. That's when a label finds you but no meaningful benefit follows. You feel fine, you test a little high on a new cutoff, and now you're a patient. The label doesn't just sit there. It rearranges your life. Follow-ups, monitoring, worry, and often a prescription with its own baggage. Overtreatment is the next rung. A pill that might help a few at high risk gets given to many at low risk, where the absolute benefit is small. Side effects aren't rare in the real world, they're everyday friction. Dizziness that makes stairs feel risky. GI upset that changes how you eat. Sleep that turns shallow. Mood that thins at the edges. One more med to steady blood pressure, then another to settle heartburn from the first, then a third because you now feel keyed up. That's the cascade. Interactions layer, symptoms blur, and soon it's hard to tell what's you and what's the regimen. Meanwhile, ordinary life becomes medical territory. Menopause gets framed as hormone deficiency instead of a phase to navigate with multiple tools. Grief, which bends time on its own terms, gets a timetable and a pill. Kids who fidget in rigid classrooms become a market segment. The message isn't suffer, it's know that normal has a wide range. When everything uncomfortable gets a code, we forget that some discomforts are part of being alive, and many respond to time, support, structure, sleep, or change, none of which have ad budgets. Then there's the nocebo effect, harm from expectation. When a culture repeats that tingles, fog, or fluttering are ominous, bodies listen. You're primed to scan for trouble. The scan finds it. The feeling grows under attention. In that loop, symptoms amplify not because you're imagining them, but because nerves and attention are partners. Add constant symptom content in your feed, and worry rehearses itself until it feels like proof. Health anxiety loves this ecosystem. Quizzes that never say you're okay keep you in suspense. Wearables push notifications that turn small fluctuations into alerts. A marginal lab value gets a red arrow in your portal. Every red arrow pulls at your amygdala. You message your clinician. The safest response for them for liability is often let's check more. More checks breed more findings. More findings justify more steps. Anxiety doesn't resolve because the flow never offers a clean exit. Financial toxicity is the side effect the ad never names. Copays look manageable until you add the specialist visit, the lab work, the monitoring device, the add-on drug to smooth side effects, and the branded option your plan prefers after rebate games you never see. Deductibles reset every January. Assistance cards sunset. A daily drug becomes a budget category. Money stress is a health risk on its own, but it doesn't appear in the outcomes table. Quick story, a warehouse supervisor starts a preventive med after a screening at work. The first month, he's lightheaded on ladders. He misses a shift after a near fall, then gets switched to a night schedule to keep him safe. Sleep breaks. He drinks more coffee. His stomach burns. Now he's got a PPI with his antihypertensive. His blood pressure number is better. His days aren't. Another real example. A college student watches focus videos at 2 a.m., books a telehealth consult, tries a stimulant, sleeps 4 hours for a week, and aces a quiz. Then she can't land the plane. An add-on for sleep starts. She skips meals, loses weight, feels brittle. Finals end. The physiology doesn't. Nobody told her that stopping is its own project. In the background, identities reshape around labels. I'm osteopenic. I'm pre-diabetic. I'm treatment-resistant. These phrases can bring community and clarity. They can also narrow your sense of possibility. You start to see yourself as a management plan, not a person with choices that vary by season, stress, and support. None of this erases real benefit. For high-risk patients, certain drugs prevent strokes, heart attacks, fractures, psychotic breaks, and deaths. The costs are worth it there. The unseen harm grows in the gray zones, the preconditions, the widened thresholds, the may help categories, where the math is thin and the marketing is thick. What's missing from the ad is the counterfactual. What happens if you wait, change sleep, move more, eat differently, breathe, talk, adjust workload, touch daylight, ask for help, or treat a root cause? Those don't work for everyone, but they do work for many, and they don't cause dry mouth, lightheadedness, or a line item on your credit card. The ad can't sell you those, so it doesn't. Does DTC advertising help patients? The evidence check. The defense goes like this. Ads inform people who'd otherwise suffer in silence. They prompt earlier care, better conversations, and improved outcomes. It's a tidy claim, so let's pull the receipts. Start with what we can measure, prescriptions and utilization. After the 1997 guidance, DTC spending surged, and so did requests for advertised drugs in clinics. Studies consistently show that patients exposed to DTC ads ask more often for specific brands and get them more often than patients who don't bring an ad into the room. That's not a moral failing, it's proof the ads work. But what happens next is the point. Prescriptions rise, especially for newer, higher-cost brands, without clear evidence that health outcomes rise at the same rate. When researchers zoomed out across 2 decades, they saw medical marketing explode, from under $20 billion in 1997 to roughly $30 billion by 2016. While DTC prescription drug ads leapt from about $1.3 billion to around $6 billion. During that period, the mix shifted towards specialty drugs with eye-watering prices. If DTC were reliably improving population health, you'd expect to see strong, consistent outcome gains tied to these campaigns. Instead, the picture is mixed. More spending, more demand, more brand name uptake, modest and uneven improvements in the metrics that matter: symptoms, events, quality of life, survival. Now look at knowledge. DTC ads are required to present a fair balance of risks and benefits, but the frame consistently inflates benefits and trims harms. Relative risk reductions headline, absolute numbers whisper. 1 in 4 saw improvement. Sounds promising until you learn that means 25% improved on the drug versus 20% on placebo. A 5% absolute bump framed as a 25% relative win. Side effects are listed, but tone and imagery soften their weight. In surveys, viewers overestimate drug benefits and underestimate harms after watching DTC ads, even when risk language is present. Do ads get people into care earlier? Sometimes. There's evidence that DTC can increase diagnosis and treatment of under-recognized conditions, depression, high cholesterol, erectile dysfunction. For certain high-risk individuals, that can be net positive. But the same mechanism produces false positives, overtreatment in low-risk groups, and medication cascades. Early care isn't automatically good care. It's only good when the baseline risk justifies the intervention and the alternatives were considered. International comparisons help. Most countries ban DTC prescription drug advertising. The US and New Zealand allow it, a policy split documented for decades. Do Americans have systematically better chronic disease outcomes because of these ads? Not broadly. We spend more on drugs, adopt brand-name therapies faster, and see higher utilization. Yet our population-level outcomes on common chronic conditions lag peers in countries that emphasize clinician-directed information and public health measures over consumer ads. That doesn't prove ads hurt, but it undercuts the claim that they're essential for better health. What about doctor-patient conversations? Proponents say ads empower patients to start hard discussions. Sometimes they do. Patients bring up stigmatized symptoms, sexual health, mental health, because an ad gave them language. But the conversation often collapses into a brand request. In a 12-minute visit, a doctor has to translate relative into absolute risk, explain numbers needed to treat, weigh alternatives, and address hope. That takes time the schedule doesn't give. In that pinch, prescribing becomes the path of least resistance, and shared decision-making turns into brand decision-making. There's also the substitution problem. DTC ads rarely highlight generics or non-drug strategies with robust evidence. They promote on-patent products with marketing budgets. In clinics, that can displace older, cheaper options with similar or better evidence for many patients. Insurers push back with formularies and step therapy, but those games introduce friction, not clarity. Meanwhile, the brand remains top of mind for the next patient who asks. Evidence on outcomes via DTC pathways is at best mixed. Reviews repeatedly find increased prescribing and higher costs, with no consistent signal of improved health metrics across populations. Outcome gains are uneven and often modest relative to spend. Individual wins exist, someone truly undertreated gets help sooner, but the aggregate picture looks like demand creation more than outcome transformation, and harms are structurally undercounted. Trials are short and selective. Real-world side effect burdens, discontinuation struggles, and financial toxicity don't feature in ad copy, and they rarely headline follow-up studies. Quick story, a man sees a biologic ad for joint pain, asks his doctor, gets started before fully trying guideline-backed first-line therapies. He feels some relief, also develops infections that force missed work. The plan covers a portion, he pays the rest. Could he have reached similar function with a cheaper regimen plus physical therapy? Maybe. The ad didn't mention that pathway, and the appointment didn't have time to map it. So does DTC help patients? It can help some start conversations, but it reliably helps companies sell specific products. It increases awareness, and awareness steers toward branded answers. If the question is, does DTC improve health outcomes proportionally to the money and attention it commands? The sober answer is no. If the question is, does DTC reshape care toward newer, pricier drugs and higher utilization? The evidence says yes, which raises the real question. If the ads don't reliably deliver better health, why do they keep winning? Follow the money. The $11 billion flywheel. How the spend pays for itself. Follow the money, and the logic snaps into focus. An $11 billion annual ad bill sounds outrageous until you match it to lifetime customer value, LTV. For many branded therapies, one new patient can be worth $3,000 per year for common chronic meds and $20,000 plus per year for specialty drugs. Keep that patient for 2 to 5 years, and a TV flight starts to look like a rounding error. Marketing teams don't see ads as expenses. They see acquisition costs against predictable revenue. Patents set the clock. From the moment a drug is approved, the meter starts running toward generic entry. Those first years are the window to build habit, physician comfort, and patient loyalty. That's why you'll see heavy campaigns early, saturate awareness while protection is highest, push trial, and cement a narrative of superiority. When generics arrive, the story shifts to adherence, and not all versions are the same. But the bulk of the value was already harvested under exclusivity. Evergreen tactics keep the wheel spinning. Expand the condition, broaden eligibility, and you don't just add patients. You add time on therapy, months convert to years, years compound revenue. Lower a threshold, define a pre-stage, or introduce maintenance language, and you lengthen treatment. If a drug moves from being a rescue option to a daily regimen, the lifetime value balloons. Ads don't need to persuade the entire population. They need to move marginal decisions at scale, nudging enough fence sitters to tip the math. Inside the company, dashboards connect spend to scripts. Media mix models tie TV GRPs, search lifts, and doctor detail frequency to new prescriptions and refills. When a line spikes after a national buy, budgets get approved faster next quarter. If a brand film outperforms, it gets more rotation. The mechanism rewards what sells, not what educates. And because specialty audiences are smaller, high CPM micro-targeting online can be more efficient than broad TV, sharpening the ROI further. Payers complicate the story, but they also create leverage. Rebates and formulary placement turn list prices into a negotiation game. Net price diverges from list price, but revenue holds via volume and mix. A brand with weighty ad presence can generate patient demand that gives it bargaining power. Put us on tier 2 or plan for angry calls. Insurers respond with step therapy and prior auths, yet those barriers can funnel patients through a short maze that still ends with the advertised drug, especially when copay cards blunt the pain at the pharmacy counter. The sticker price remains high, the patient feels relief. The plan pays the bulk and haggles on the back end. While that's unfolding, media partners become stakeholders. Local stations, national networks, streaming platforms, pharma is a dependable buyer. In lean ad markets, a big health campaign props up a quarter. That dependence isn't corruption, it's gravity. Newsrooms run more health segments. Platforms offer custom units. Creators pitch awareness series. Everyone upstream of the prescription has a reason to keep the conversation warm. Pull the thread, and you'll hit payrolls far from the clinic. The flywheel's resilience shows when science wobbles. A new warning label appears. The campaign pivots messaging. A competitor arrives, budget surge to defend share. A lawsuit lands, legal vets scripts while media keeps running disease awareness that doesn't name the brand but sustains the patient funnel. Because each part is modular, awareness, ask your doctor, copay support, adherence outreach, the system adapts without stopping. Here's how it plays out. A brand manager faces a quarter-end gap. The team increases paid search on symptoms plus treatment, buys a last-minute cable package around morning news, and launches an adherence email sequence to cut churn. 2 weeks later, new prescriptions tick up 3%, refills hold, and the slide deck shows green arrows. Next quarter's budget grows. Add telehealth and acquisition costs drop again. A patient sees an ad, taps a link, books a same-day consult with a partner platform trained on the brand's profile, closing the loop from impression to prescription in 24 hours. Friction melts. Where a clinic visit might have introduced alternatives, a remote pathway emphasizes recognition and starts therapy. That closed loop, ad to consult to script, turns marketing into distribution. Even setbacks can pay. Public debate over guidelines or pricing often boosts search volume and brand name recall. The attention drives more research, which lands on pages designed to convert curiosity into appointments. As long as the conversation stays about the condition and not about absolute benefit or deprescribing, the wheel keeps turning. This is the quiet truth. $11 billion isn't scattered hope. It's an engine tuned to convert attention into diagnosis, diagnosis into initiation, and initiation into months on therapy. Surround the patient, surround the doctor, shape the guideline window, soften the price at the counter, and follow with reminders. When each gear reinforces the next, the spend doesn't just pay for itself, it funds the machine that makes tomorrow's spend work even better. Cracks in the facade. Lawsuits, fines, and backfires. Every engine throws a rod sometimes. In pharma, the cracks show up as lawsuits, warning letters, and ads that trip over their own promises. They don't stop the flywheel, but they reveal how it runs and where incentives outrun prudence. Start with misleading promotion. When companies blur risks or stretch indications, the FDA fires off letters, omission of risk, overstatement of efficacy. They're not rare. Some years, dozens land on corporate desks, flagging TV spots, websites, and conference booths. The letters force fixes, pull ads, and leave a paper trail that regulators, journalists, and plaintiffs, attorneys read like a map. In 2024-2025, enforcement continued with new warning letters citing overstated benefits and minimization of risks in digital and broadcast ads, reinforcing that the format persists, but the guardrails still bite. Then come the big settlements. Off-label promotion pushing a drug for uses not approved has triggered multi-billion-dollar payouts across the industry. Individual settlements have exceeded $2 billion. The pattern is familiar. A sales culture that nudges reps to educate doctors on adjacent conditions, sponsored talks that shade into promotion, internal emails that don't age well in discovery. The company denies wrongdoing, pays a fine, signs a corporate integrity agreement, and moves on. Revenue often dwarfs penalties. The message inside the industry isn't never do it, it's document better and be subtler. Safety revelations are another seam. A drug launches with clean trials, then the real world delivers surprises. Rare cardiac events, liver signals, suicidal ideation clusters. Post-marketing surveillance catches patterns, labels get updated, sometimes with a black box warning that turns copywriters' hair gray. Ads pivot, fewer lifestyle scenes, more sober disclaimers, tighter targeting to patients who stand to benefit most. Prescriptions dip, often temporarily. If alternatives are scarce, the market stabilizes with stricter monitoring protocols. Whistleblowers, often sales reps or medical liaisons, add texture to the public record. They describe quota pressure, hit the number or lose the territory, in clever workarounds. Seeding trials as de facto sampling, speaker programs that reward volume, education decks that emphasize underdiagnosis. When these insiders file under the False Claims Act, the government sometimes joins. The filings expose slide titles, call scripts, incentive structures. They also show how much of this lives in gray zones. Technically legal tactics pushed past prudence by a spreadsheet. Now to the cultural backfires. Some ads simply misread the room. A tone-deaf spot frames a common life struggle as pathology and gets roasted. Memes flood timelines, parodies of the ad's gentle voice promising a pill for being human. Hashtags trend. The brand pulls the campaign, issues a "we heard you" statement, and tests rough cuts with more focused groups. The backlash dents reputation, not necessarily sales. Other backfires are subtler. A campaign that leans on representation skips nuance and draws criticism from the very communities it sought to reach. Or a celebrity partnership unravels when the spokesperson's disclosures lag the endorsements. The internet receipts get compiled, headlines follow. The company clarifies, tightens guidelines, and keeps buying media. Attention, even bruised, still fuels recall. Real example, a blockbuster drug faces a safety scare after launch. Cases of a rare but serious infection appear. An internal safety committee urges caution. Marketing fears collapse. The FDA adds a boxed warning. The next quarter's ads center on for those who haven't found relief, with clear callouts to screening and monitoring. Clinics add checklists. Prescriptions dip and then plateau. For high-need patients, the calculus still favors use. For marginal cases, the pendulum swings to alternatives. The machine trims its sails, it doesn't sink. Legal skirmishes sometimes target the ad scaffold itself. Advocacy groups petition to kill adequate provision, arguing consumers need fuller risk lists on air. Industry counters that long, dense warnings reduce comprehension. Courts and regulators weigh speech, safety, and practicality. The status quo wobbles, then holds. When enforcement spikes, new waves of warning letters, talk of rollback. Brands shift spend to unbranded awareness, influencer content, and provider-facing channels until the heat cools. Journalistic hits land too. Investigations connect guideline panelists, financial ties to threshold shifts. Exposés trace ghostwritten supplements back to a sponsor. A news magazine airs a segment on symptom quizzes funneling to telehealth. For a week, the story dominates health Twitter. The following week, a new breakthrough press release resets the cycle. Here's the part most viewers miss. Many setbacks are line items. Fines are budgeted. PR crises are modeled. Media buys include contingency plans. The playbook anticipates turbulence because it's baked into drug development and promotion. When a channel closes, money reroutes, not out of the system, but through a different pipe. Still, cracks matter. They slow enthusiasm, force label clarity, and arm clinicians and patients with questions that cut through gloss. A black box warning changes clinic workflows. A settlement chills a sales pitch. A public backlash makes the next ad less cavalier. Each fracture is a reminder. The machine isn't invincible, it's adaptable. And if the system won't fix itself on principle, pressure can still reshape its edges. Which brings us to the only leverage you control: how you spot the lie in real time. How to spot the lie in real time. Actionable filter. Here's the filter you can run in your head while the ad is still talking. Start with the language tells. May help, could support, restore balance, feel more like yourself. Those aren't lies, they're hedges. If the verbs are soft and the nouns are vague, you're in a feelings-forward pitch. Translate it in your mind. This might help a bit for some people, some of the time with trade-offs. Next, scan for labels. New names and preconditions are red flags to pause, not panic. Prediabetes, prehypertension, osteopenia, these can be legitimate markers, but they're also market expanders. Ask, who decided this label, when was it created, and what changed in the threshold? If a fresh acronym appears everywhere at once, assume a campaign is warming the diagnosis. Now listen for numbers. If the ad or article quotes relative risk, cuts risk by 30%, you need the base rate. Ask for absolute risk reduction. If 10 out of 100 have an event without the drug and 7 out of 100 with it, that's a 3% absolute drop framed as 30% relative. Your decision should ride on the 3%, not the 30%. No absolute numbers, that's a tell. Bring 2 questions to every appointment. What's the NNT and the time horizon? Number needed to treat says how many people need the drug for one to benefit. Time horizon says how long before benefit shows up. NNT of 25 over 5 years lands very differently than NNT of 3 over 6 weeks. If your clinician doesn't have those numbers handy, ask where you can find them together. Demand comparators. Compared to what is the most powerful sentence you can say? Is the drug compared to placebo, to the best generic, or to lifestyle interventions with evidence? If the study didn't pit the brand against a cheaper, established option, the benefit might be more marketing than medicine for your case. Ask to see head-to-head data when it exists. Watch for broadened thresholds. If your lab slips from normal to borderline high because a committee moved a line last year, you don't owe an automatic prescription. Ask whether the new threshold applies equally across age, sex, ethnicity, and baseline risk. Sometimes the average recommendation isn't your recommendation. Decode the risk readout. The ad lists serious harms quickly while you watch a picnic. Slow it down in the office. What are the common side effects? How often do they happen, and how reversible are they? What's the discontinuation rate in real-world use? What are the withdrawal or rebound effects if you stop? Write those answers down before you start. Interrogate duration. Is this a bridge or a marriage? Maintenance can mean months or years. Ask for an exit plan on day one. What would success look like? How would we step down? And what signs tell us to stop? If there's no clear off-ramp, assume you'll carry both the cost and the side effects longer than you think. Check conflicts without making it awkward. Who funded the guideline behind this recommendation? Does the patient pamphlet cite an advocacy group funded largely by the manufacturer? Are the educational modules industry-sponsored? You don't need a courtroom, you need context. Conflicts don't erase truth, but they shift probabilities. Use a 3-option script. After you hear the pitch, ask your clinician to lay out best brand option, best generic option, best non-pharmacologic option. For each, get absolute benefit, main harms, time to benefit, and cost. If one option lacks data on any of those, that option should lose confidence points. Mind the funnel online. If a quiz never has a "you're fine" outcome, it isn't education, it's lead gen. If the result routes you to a telehealth sign-up in 2 clicks, step back. Search for independent sources. Cochrane reviews, USPSTF recommendations, guideline summaries from groups that disclose funding and panel ties clearly. Normalize watchful waiting. For borderline results or mild symptoms, ask whether time, sleep, diet tweaks, movement, or therapy could be first line, and how long to try them before reconsidering. Get specifics. Let's try 12 weeks with goals A, B, and C, then recheck. A plan beats vague reassurance. Use side effect pre-commitments. Before starting, decide what you're willing to tolerate and for how long. If you agree that persistent insomnia, dizziness, or mood flattening beyond 2 weeks is a stop signal, you won't argue with yourself later while sunk cost bias whispers. Give it more time. Bring your life into the math. A 2% 10-year absolute benefit may matter to someone with a family history who sleeps well and tolerates meds. It may not for someone juggling shift work, caregiving, and tight budgets. Evidence informs, values decide. Say your priorities out loud. Ask for plain language. If you hear relative, surrogate endpoint, or non-inferiority, pause and request translation. Does this make me feel better, function better, or live longer? By how much and when? If the answer is we don't know yet, that's an answer. Finally, track your own outcomes. If you start, measure what matters to you: pain days, steps, sleep, focus hours, lab values. If benefit doesn't show up on the timeline you agreed on, revisit. Deprescribing is not failure, it's care. Run this filter and you won't dodge every bad spend or side effect. But you'll turn a sales script into a shared decision, and that changes where the story goes next. Smarter paths, evidence first, patient first choices. If the machine is built to nudge you toward a prescription, the counter is slow medicine with a stopwatch. Evidence first, your life first. Start with shared decision-making that's actually shared. Not a quick nod, but a structured talk with decision aids on the table, absolute benefits, harms, timelines, and costs laid out in plain numbers. If a choice changes your daily life, you deserve more than a headline and a copay card. Ask your clinician to co-create a plan with milestones and off-ramp. Next, schedule deprescribing checkups. Just like you get a physical, get a medication audit. Bring every bottle. Ask, still needed, still working, still the lowest effective dose. Can we step down safely? Many meds were started in a rush and never reevaluated. A deliberate taper can return sleep, balance, or energy you didn't realize the regimen had taxed. Put stop rules in writing so maybe later doesn't become forever. Sequence lifestyle before lifelong, where evidence supports it. For mild hypertension, the DASH pattern, daily walks, and alcohol limits can rival a pill when you stick with them. For prediabetes, weight loss and muscle work often beat metformin at the start. For insomnia, CBTI outperforms sleep meds long-term without hangovers. You don't need lectures, you need a specific program, a start date, and accountability. Ask for referrals, not vague advice. A cooking class, a walking group, a sleep clinic, a therapist trained in behavioral approaches. Those are interventions, too. When a drug is warranted, optimize generics before chasing novelty. Step therapy makes sense when steps are transparent and patient-centered. Insist on a head-to-head rationale. Why this brand over that generic for you? If the answer is marketing, that's not a reason. If the answer is you tried, didn't tolerate, or didn't respond, that's a path. Pair generics with tight feedback loops. Track symptoms, labs, and function, so you escalate only when the data and your lived experience agree. Tune dosing to goals you can feel. Lower LDL is abstract. Climb stairs without stopping is concrete. If a target won't change how you live, ask whether it's the right target. Swap surrogate endpoints for outcomes that matter to you. Pain-free days, focus hours, sleep efficiency, number of dizzy episodes, number of weekends you can hike. Your chart should read like your life, not just your labs. Use independent tools in the room. Bring risk calculators that show absolute numbers, QRISK, ASCVD, fracture risk, so you can see what a drug actually moves for someone like you. Pull up trustworthy summaries, Cochrane, choosing wisely, USP-STF to check for overreach. When guidance is split, name the uncertainty. A tie should go to the option with fewer harms and lower cost for a trial period. Make time an ally. For borderline conditions, set a watchful waiting window with a checklist. What you'll try, what you'll track, when you'll reassess. Build defaults that favor pausing, not drifting. If X doesn't improve by week 6, we escalate. If Y improves, we keep going. If Z side effect appears, we stop. That clarity makes future you grateful. Protect your budget like an organ. Before starting, get a full year cost picture. Drug, labs, visits, devices. Ask your pharmacist about therapeutically equivalent cheaper options and manufacturer assistance, but also ask for the exit plan when assistance ends. Financial stress worsens outcomes. If two choices have similar benefit, pick the one that doesn't raid your grocery money. Bring your circle into care. A 10-minute walkthrough with a spouse, parent, or friend increases follow-through on sleep goals, food plans, and tapers. Ask your employer for flexible starts during a sleep reset or a quiet workspace during a medication trial. Small environment shifts multiply benefits and shrink the need for add-ons. Finally, measure your own N of 1. Keep a simple log, what you took, what you felt, what you did. Graphs of your steps, sleep, pain, or focus beat vague impressions at every check-in. If the line doesn't move on the timeline you set, change course. That isn't non-compliance. That's you practicing medicine on the only patient you'll treat for life. None of this is anti-medicine. It's medicine that earns its place in your day. Evidence first, your values centered, time respected, money guarded, exit plans ready. When you operate that way, the ads whisper fades and your choices sound like you. Origin story revisited. The moment the door opened. To understand how this lie became habit, we have to go back to a quiet bureaucratic pivot that changed your living room. It's 1997 with final guidance in 1999. For decades, televised prescription drug ads were basically impossible because the law required full risk lists, pages of side effects nobody could cram into 30 seconds. Then the FDA issues a guidance that doesn't rewrite the law, it clarifies it. Companies can satisfy the rules if they state the major risks and provide adequate provision to the full details elsewhere. An 800 number, a website print. The door doesn't swing, it clicks open. Inside marketing departments, that click sounds like thunder. TV is suddenly feasible, not just for disease awareness, but for branded pitches with a new rhythm. Show lives restored, name the drug, read the big risks quickly, point to where the rest lives. In boardrooms, media plans blossom. The United States, alongside New Zealand, becomes the exception, one of the only places where a company can talk directly to you about a prescription-only drug. At first, the ads look odd, Pharma on primetime reading side effects over backyard parties. Then repetition does its work. The format becomes familiar enough to fade into the furniture, a background rhythm your brain stops questioning. Meanwhile, lobbying ensures the clarification hardens into industry practice. Meetings with regulators to fine-tune language, trade groups arguing that ads educate patients and destigmatize care. Criticism calls it a loophole, industry calls it practicality. The cameras keep rolling. Media economics lock in. Networks learn that pharma is a reliable buyer. Local stations slot health segments next to drug spots. Morning shows welcome physicians who can explain new under-recognized conditions. The dependence is subtle but real. Health budgets stabilize shaky quarters. When a news division debates a tough piece on pricing or promotion, executives feel the pressure of ad commitments, even if nobody says it out loud. In clinics, a cultural phrase takes root. Ask your doctor. It sounds empowering. It is sometimes. It also reframes the consult as a response to a purchase funnel. Doctors, already racing the clock, meet patients primed by weeks of soft focus repetition. Saying no takes longer than saying yes. Saying, let's try sleep, diet, movement, therapy requires a map, and follow up the schedule doesn't fund. Prescriptions rise because the system rewards speed. The guidance also births a shadow genre, unbranded disease education. No product named, just signs, symptoms, and a nudge to talk to your doctor. These campaigns warm the field before a launch, build search demand, and shape the vocabulary patients bring into appointments. They're legal insulation and marketing primer in one. Here's the irony the moment created. The requirement for fair balance pushed risk language into the ad, yet the pairing with idealized imagery taught audiences to hear danger as background noise. The list is spoken, the picnic persists. The brain learns the cadence. The warning becomes part of the lullaby. Culturally, we adjusted quickly. A generation grew up with side effects read over sunsets. The strangeness faded, an expectation formed. Health became a consumer category with primetime slots, brand celebrities, and seasonal cycles. January, weight and blood sugar. Spring, allergies and mood. Fall, joints and energy. The ad calendar became a health calendar. Meanwhile, the architecture around that 1997 click matured. KOL networks, trial design choices, guideline committees, CME channels, advocacy partnerships, influencer contracts, SEO, telehealth funnels, all the pipes we traced were laid across that opening. Without the on-ramp of consumer advertising, the rest would have looked different. With it, the machine could touch you at home, on your phone, in your feed, and in your exam room, with one consistent refrain. There's a name for what you feel and a product within reach. We paid for that shift in ways that were hard to tally. Attention captured by campaigns, clinic minutes spent undoing frames, dollars steered to brands over basics, thresholds negotiated into disease, anxiety stoked into action, while outcomes improved unevenly. It wasn't one villain's plan. It was a guidance that became a grammar of how we talk about health and how money talks through it. So, what did the $11 billion lie really buy? It bought the right to make symptoms into markets, and to make markets feel like care. We turned symptoms into markets and trust into ads, trading quiet judgment for a chorus that sells certainty. If this pulled back the curtain, subscribe and watch our next deep dive on how food labels play the same game, and share this with someone drowning in pill commercials so they can change the channel inside their head.